Thank you. You may be seated. Well, welcome to Summerland Julia Street Community Church. Welcome to our in-house family as well as those watching elsewhere. Welcome to our visitors, too, that are here this morning. I see a number of them. Some of them I certainly didn't know as they walked in, but the Hackings are been here before, I know. And so thank you for coming. We have some birthdays. I won't tell you how old they are, but because I'd get shot, I'm sure. But birthday for Joanne Clammer on the 16th, and Winnie, she's not here this morning, Weldon, and Orville sitting in the back there on the 19th. And Pastor Don has given me a note, so I have to do this as a plug too. It's Bob and Irene's 61st anniversary on August the 17th.
Wow.
He had put down on the original note March the 17th, and I said I have to apologize to Irene if I missed it.
Don't hit my slide there, buddy.
Well, look at that. I saw already started Greg's book. To support our church, you know that is there's offering envelopes and boxes in the back, or you can e-transfer to office@juliastreet.ca. Pastor Don will be back next Sunday, and I hope they've had a good rest away. Today, Greg is going to finish off with his second part of the God's Grand Design. And Greg and I look eye to eye on this because we both belong to CMI. And I would certainly encourage you to look at CMI, Christian Ministries International. They're a wonderful Christian organization. They put out a tremendous magazine every second month, and you'd be astounded at the stuff that God has designed and put for our pleasure. It's an amazing, amazing organization, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. So, Greg, call Greg up, and he can start his second presentation.
Hey, thank you.
You got your mic.
Thank you. I thought for a while he was going to do this, and I was like, that'd be different. You could. You want to just start flipping through these slides here? Oh, hold it down. Press and hold. Press and hold. There. There we go. Okay. Good. I don't know how come I knew that, but I did. Thank you for the lights going off. Thank you, everyone. Some came, they were here last week. Oh, yeah, but this is Sunday and you have to go to church. Sometimes what you do here is we're used to sort of a certain style, which is fair enough. Often when you do these presentations, you do it on another day of the week. But the odd time, like in this case, I was very honored for Pastor Don saying, have 2 weeks here. And there's a bit of science, and some said that, yeah, they found it challenging, others found it quite interesting. So I understand there's a broad range of backgrounds here. Very hard to hit everybody in the level you're at or so on. The main thing is try to get the overall. If sometimes the details are bogging you down, I'm going to try to highlight what the important parts would be. So in this part here, I hope to lighten it up a bit too at times. We did talk about two possible origins. We talked about the biblical origin in Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, that means that He created everything that's in it, on it, and so on. It did not evolve. The second story, secular history, would be in the beginning, the Big Bang singularity created the heavens and the earth. And so we talked about that a bit. How could that even come about? How did everything, which they say, the universe, space itself, time, came into being out of absolute nothingness? Not only maybe one time, but they're saying maybe it happened an infinite number of times in what they call multiverse. No evidence, nothing to prove it. It's just a belief system. On the other hand, when we look at the Bible, we also have a history of man. And we will see two different ideas here. Well, what does the Bible say? It says that God created man. So we have Genesis 1:27. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female. We won't get into that other part. Evolution begins with the assumption that man has evolved from ape-like creatures. So when you look at the pictures, maybe you get to pick your relative. Now I'm going, okay, I do this in a bit, so that's not fair because they didn't say they evolved from ape creatures, they say ape-like creatures. Okay, so we'll make one up, and I'm thinking of you, Bill Cody, up front, and maybe this is your grandfather, right? And so I don't like to, be sexist here, so, well, maybe this is your grandmother. Okay, how many grandfather and grandmothers are sitting here right now? Like, show of hands, yeah. Okay, so we got to laugh at that a bit. I found that was a pretty good graphic they did. Here's another one that lampoons creationists, because I would be considered a creationist. And they often show this iconic image, of course. And what they've done is, you can see the first sort of more stooped over character there is Australopithecus africanus. Then you have Homo erectus, then you have the creationist, and then you have Neanderthal, and then modern human. And of course, that is meant to believe that we are just not quite there, right? We're not quite evolved to a full intelligence. But the interesting thing about this image, I get to use that because right now, with more and more evidence compiling, basically we're finding that from Homo erectus on up, we're just variation of humans. Oh, really? Well, let's, for example, just quickly now, just to show you how it goes. There was the original pictures in our textbooks of who Neanderthal was, right? A lot of you that are old enough, you can remember this picture. And they're basing it on the bones that they found and so on, and it looks like certainly an ape-like creature. Even I would admit that. The trouble is, when evidence began to compile more and more, the story had to change. So that in 2008, National Geographic, so I tossed that away, it was called, notice this, The Other Humans, Neanderthals Revealed. I mean, I remember seeing this at the college on the table in our staff room, and I was like, okay, finally. It's catching up. Because these are really just humans. Matter of fact, we now know they interbred with humans. They buried their dead. You might have Neanderthal genes in you right now because they really were human. Here's another picture now of what they believe. A lot of difference, isn't there, between that very first picture and the very last one that I now showed you. Well, when you see the creation model, and what we say is this. I did mention briefly the other time that we said plant and animal groups were created by God to reproduce after their kind. Okay, that's in Genesis chapter 1. Now, God created these original kinds with information-rich genomes, the genes, the DNA, that enabled them to adapt to different environments. So yes, there will be change, but what is the change? You only get what we would like to call adaptation or horizontal variations. So this led to what you call speciations. A lot of you know what different species of cats and animals there are varies around. So you get, speciations within the kinds of plants and animals, but they do not change from one kind to the other. So you got to be careful when an evolutionist tells you, but we observe change. Well, we go, yes, you do. So do we. We can see that. But the interpretation of what you're seeing, which I'll get into later, is a different thing. So we're saying that God created maybe the original dog-wolf kind. There's excellent evidence that all the wolves, coyotes, to domesticated dogs, over time, through breeding or through natural selection, came from an original pair that had enough information in that genome for the variances that you see. I mean, even the domestic dog we talked about, okay, how many have a Chihuahua? How many have a Great Dane? They're still a dog, right? Okay. Now, creationists like to throw a little fancier terms at this, so I'm going to do this just because I never get a chance much. We like to call them the front-loaded baranomes. Oh my gosh. Okay, you know what bara, I mentioned this last time. Bara is the word Hebrew for create. So think of it as created genome. You notice what it says? Front-loaded. In other words, God created it. He put it there all at once, fully formed, fully functional. So that, I like this one, you ready? So that you can have limited common descent through adaptive radiation from pluripotent and undifferentiated baranomes. You got it? How's your church going this morning? Are you with me yet? Are you awake yet? Well, okay, the fancy part of this means, what is limited common descent? See, Darwin said that from the original single-cell creature, it descended, in a sense, all the way through all creatures and eventually to humans. That's what they would call descent. We would say, yeah, there's some changes, but it was limited. And it was through adaptive procedures, things when the animals changed in different environments and so on. Pluripotent and undifferentiated means God created them, wow, awesome in the first place. So sorry, Adam beats, I can't say the word pants off here, can you? Anyhow, he beats the heck out of all of us for what he has as far as intellect and what his genome would have been like. See, on the other hand, the biological theory of evolution goes something like this. We mentioned it before. First of all, you can only count when you have something that's already able to replicate itself. So, for example, you have to have a one-celled creature, but it has to be able to reproduce itself. Now you can start with Darwinian theory. How does it change? Well, they say these changes, mutations, we've all heard that word now, within this DNA, they supply the new raw material. Oh, it sounds good, you know, like it just goes in there, it goes bing, change that little code, change that little piece of code, and we're all good to go. So then we need, of course, natural selection, because what would it do? For those mutations that were bad, well, it'll weed them out, because you won't live long enough to maybe reproduce. On the other hand, if it's a good advantage, and as I say from my wife, if I can run a little faster, maybe I'm going to be able to pass my genes on, not now, but you know, later on. You get what I'm saying. So what do we say? What do they say? In the big picture, small incremental variations through eons of time changed microbes into man. That's their story. Quite different. So this is mutation and not selection. So here we go, a little bit heavier for a second, so just bear with me, please, because I mentioned this last time, and then we'll get on to something a little bit, pulls a little lighter. The reason I'm doing this is the problem with that idea of mutation and what it is, because it's in every, heck, I've been watching, you know, these little TV shows and so on, you know, all the Marvel ones and that. Like mutations are just all over the place. They create these mutant guys that are sort of incredible. They can do all kinds of stuff. Makes it sound almost like a good thing. Sorry, folks, it ain't a good thing. So I did mention last time, and we showed a little clip, how the cell makes proteins. Well, just quick, right? Why did I say this? DNA is like the cookbook. And remember how they unravel the two parts of that? And then one side of it has a code that's called transcribing. Then they take that and it becomes messenger RNA. So it's taking the cookbook, making a copy of a portion of it, maybe the recipe you want, heads into the kitchen. So it sends out to the outer parts of the cell to an area where there's a ribosome. And that's a little factory. And that's a good term for it. It's a molecular little factory. And what it does is it says, okay, bring in the right ingredients, tRNA, transfer RNA, don't worry about that. It brings in the right amino acids. Here's how it goes. Amino acids, there's 23. They're a chemical. 23 of them make up all the proteins in us. It's the order of those and the type of amino acids that are arranged in a sequence that make the proteins, whether it's bone, collagen, you know, fingernails, hair, and so on. Everything in our body is made of those. It's pretty amazing. Like, it's awesome just to think about alone. All right. So you see pictures like this often in textbooks. This is hemoglobin, right? The good stuff that carries the iron in our blood. So the order of these amino acids, 23 of them, in a protein, they can all be quite big, has to be just right to give the protein the right three-dimensional shape. And the picture on the right shows human hemoglobin. Each pair of chains contains 287 amino acids, each pair of those. Okay, so then I did this and I went, okay, I found the code. There it is. See all those A, T, G's, and C's on the side? There's only 4 of them, right? If you notice, there's an A, G, C, or T. From those letters, that's kind of like the zeros and ones in a computer at the base level, on, off, except now there's 4. From those, we get all the possible combinations we need to make every protein in your body, which orders in the millions, they think, in terms of types. It's phenomenal. And you know what? The sequence has to be right to do it. If you change the type of AGCTs or you change the order, all of a sudden it's wrong. And you need 287. Now I can get into how do you randomly produce that to make it function, because it has to be like that or it won't function at all. So basically the content and order of this code must be conserved so that hemoglobin will form correctly. Well, you see this beta chain here. Here's now that code did this. There's the possible 23 different amino acids all in a chain. And they all get, and then there's another machine that helps to fold them up in the right shape. And you make hemoglobin. It's very complex, but on the other hand, it's amazing, because it is that complex. The reason I did all this, folks, was trying to do this. Mutations are supposedly the way you get evolution to happen. All right, that's their mantra, mutations. Well, here's the thing. Call them the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mutations are indeed changes to the DNA code. This happens when one of the base molecules, AGCT, is changed. It just takes one or more. These mutations can have different effects on the organism. They are usually classified as neutral, bad, or good. All right, now we'll lighten it up. You make a scaffold. Pretend that's kind of like a part of your body that has protein in it. It's doing a function. And in this case, what does it do? Well, it can lift and hold somebody up. They want to paint, they want to do construction, and so on. And I picked one as a wood one. That thing has a purpose, and it's designed for that purpose. Everybody would give me, I think, a thumbs up on that. Well, what is a bad mutation like? Well, a bad mutation is like taking an axe and start hitting at the structure, at the different structures and the beams there. Well, if you hit them hard enough, what's going to happen? Eventually, you may break some of the beams, you may cause them to lose their strength or so on, and either get bending of the scaffold, so it'll be partially functional, or maybe even collapse, and that loses everything. Okay, now you're in trouble. Well, if you lose everything, eventually you're going to have a problem within the organism. So in a biological realm, you can think of this as an organism in the form of disease, abnormalities, etc. Not good, right? Not good. So natural selection may cull the organism. Now here, that's where we believe in natural selection, even as a creationist. It'll prevent the bad ones from going on because you won't be able to reproduce. The organism will often die before they have a chance to raise offspring. So in other words, it's a culling feature, natural selection. It doesn't help things get better. Here's the real problem. These things, what they call neutral, they're actually near neutral mutations. They're never totally neutral. Why is that? It kind of goes like this. Take the axe, Bill Cody, and go chip at that little structure and hit it in another place and take another nick out of here, another nick out of here. Well, what's going to happen? Well, generally at first, right, you're not going to have a problem because you only get a little bit of damage. The thing will still function. It'll do what it's supposed to be. But living organism in the sense of small mutations, yeah, they can keep living. It can happen. But what happens when it keeps going? Eventually, you're going to have this. It's lost all its function. It's going to collapse. It's no good. Now, mind you, you go like this, well, if it's lost its original function, it's not evolved, but devolved from mutations. And I'm going, okay, devolved, gee, okay. You know what, though? You can always come up with a story that says, oh, no, it still has a function. Right? So you can't win, right? So in a sense, it evolved a new function. Good for being burnt up. Now, what they're really after, though, is these supposed good mutations. Well, what would that be like? Well, it's something that adds something new, right? Think of that for a sec. Something new, something that improves it. For example, maybe you put some wheels in it. Maybe some metal rods go in place of the wooden struts. Well, this is good. It all sounds nice, but here's the problem for evolution. A mutation can be beneficial to the animal or plants in terms of survival. Got that word? Because we were talking about this the other day at our Saturday morning coffee down. Somebody asked a question, well, what about this? Mutations can be beneficial for short-term survival. Yes, but they've never been observed to create new structures like functioning eyes or wings, etc. Remember, you have to get from a single-celled creature up through all the different complexities of animals and plants until you get to maybe man. That requires a whole ton of new features and new things that have to be there. Eyes and wings and legs and so on and so forth. It's incredible what you really see. Now, here's an example of evolution in action. How many people remember sickle cell anemia, right? That's a big problem, especially in Africa. Okay, here's what happened. In many proteins, having just one wrong of those 23 amino acids in the wrong place, the protein can lose some or all of its function. Okay, so in hemoglobin, it turns out that there's a place where this one amino acid valine is substituted by glutamic acid. Don't worry about it. It's not the detail. It doesn't count. All I'm saying is there's one change that occurred. A mutation happened, one change. You'll often end up with then this sickle shape within the red blood cells instead of being the nice round ones. You're anemic. So this is a disease. All right? And you say, well, that's a bad mutation. Well, first of all, let me go, where was that mutation? They actually know this quite well now. There's the letter codes that coded for this hemoglobin. All right, are you ready for this? It turns out it's the 20th letter. The adenine A got replaced with a T in that mutation. When that happened, you get, it's called, by the way, a point mutation, because there's only one, and basically it ends up changing from a glutamic acid, it gets replaced by valine. That one change leads to sickle cell anemia. One. So how did that evolve exactly in that right order? How did it get there? So what's going to happen? Well, they say, well, just a minute, we're not finished yet. Malaria. It's a big problem, comes from this bacteria Plasmodium vivax, and it causes this, often fatal disease. And here's how it works. There's two parts of the gene that you have, genes, right? Two parts. So if you have the defective sickle cell gene from only one parent, the healthy gene can enable you to still survive the most serious effects of sickle cell anemia. So you got kind of half a problem, right? But you know what? That gall darn little bacteria there doesn't like that. So in other words, you're less likely to develop malaria, which is often fatal. So let's think about that for a sec. You got a mutation. You're lucky enough to have only one parent that had that mutation. The other one was okay. Their offspring then are you, and you can still be partially anemic in a sense, but you don't get malaria. What do you think is going to happen in Africa, where the flies are carrying this malaria bacteria all over the place? The ones that have that combination of good and bad will tend to survive. They will tend to pass in their genes. So guess what happened? In the population, just like you expected, you saw an abundance of this sickle cell anemia. But you got to remember though, is this upward evolution in effect? No, because the one that causes sickle cell anemia would consider to be beneficial if you live in Africa and you have a lot of that malaria around. Yeah, I get it. However, it's not upwards evolution because you got a loss of information here. You now have a deformed red blood cell, not the normal, good, fully functioning round red blood cell. Got my point? I hope, maybe. Okay, switch topics a bit. Same idea though. I've been using that word information. Notice that we're in chemicals and got codes, but it's information. DNA is information, for example. Well, information is an interesting thing. For example, if I take some letters written in yellow there, keyboard, I just went nuts with the keyboard, okay? And you would basically say, as far as communicable information between us, it is useless. It doesn't tell you a thing. So I would call that sort of randomness, no information present. Nobody, I think, would agree with that one. Now, what about order? ABC, 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 ABC. Is there information there? Kind of maybe not, maybe. Well, how about this one? Complexity then. Large amounts of information are present. I arrange the letters so it spells, we are going to Nova Scotia to visit our children and grandchildren. Okay? Now I've communicated something to you. Now information works. By the way, was it the letters that just counted? Nope. It was the arrangements of those letters that counts. Key. It's the arrangement of the letters. So it's not chemicals when it comes to DNA. It's the arrangement of the codes that count. That's information. So in nature then, I tried to make up some stuff here. Well, maybe no information present. How about leaves on the ground? Yeah, I don't think there's anything there. How about order? Very little information. I like a snowflake. It has some order to it. Complexity though, large amounts of information are present. Example, DNA. It's one of the best examples we have. Now I want to point something out here. You ready? My first little bit of show and tell. This is getting to be an ancient thing, but we still know what that is. That's a DVD. Now, you know, it's very interesting because when you look at this DVD right here, and for those, if I didn't have it with me, I actually do have a picture. Where is the information? The information is not the plastic. That's the chemical. That's the stuff, okay, the material. It's not even the little reflective bits of the plastic itself. It is the arrangement of those plastic bits that give you information right there. So then what would be the difference for DNA? How do you get the information there? Well, the evolutionists say this kind of happened, but here's the problem. In information theory, a little technical here, you know what? There's no known natural law which gives rise to matter giving to information. Can't happen. Done. Life requires information. You need DNA. It's just loaded with information. Well, the question is where to come from. Now, the interesting thing is, information can never increase on its own. You have to have some intelligence to create the information. It has a tendency to degrade. Everybody done that little whisper game? You start off with some statement and let it pass through the crowd. Perfect example of information has a tendency to degrade. It's kind of like second law of thermodynamics, except for from order to disorder. So it's not the stuff, it's what the order is. So DNA will lose information when mutations occur. Has anything so far led you to believe that evolution can happen vertically, that it can get more and more complex information, more and more stuff there for you and I? Doesn't look like it, does it? Well, how about this? I'm going to make some mutations occur on information. Now, this sentence has a function for you folks. Your food is in the refrigerator in the downstairs bedroom. Good. I'm hungry. I like that kind of information. I know where I'm going. All right, now mutation happens. At first, I'll be kind of nice with my mutations. Turns out that letter A got changed to an N. So your food is in the refrigerator and the downstairs bedroom. Would you still know where to go, probably? Most people, I think, can still figure that one out, right? We can correct it a bit. My next one, change the S with a Z. Well, now we're in the downstairs bedroom. Well, you know what? I still know where I'm going to eat. I have no problem. So far, these are called like near-neutral mutations, aren't they? Keep going. Your food is in the refrigerator and downstairs bedroom. Maybe. Now I'm going to mean. Now I changed some first letters, by the way. Your food is in the refrigerator and the downstairs ood room. I'm not sure. I think now I'm beginning to lose it. Although I might go, wait a minute, I don't know what an ood room is, but I know what a bedroom is. All right. Now, your wood is in the refrigerator and downstairs ood room. Well, now I'm hungry. I'm not going down to get wood. I think this is definitely a crash in mutation. This is going to say, I'm done. Bad mutation. Right? So this can keep going. I keep changing it and try to pronounce it after Rudder. A while it gets tough. Your wood is tun rio retirator at the downstairs ood room. And I kept going. Bad. So what happened? With time and mutation, can't select it out, it loses. Okay. Now, what about design? That's part of what I just said, God's grand design. Well, a little definition, right? To create, to fashion, to execute, construct, according to plan, devise, or contrive. Okay, fancy. To conceive and plan out of mind. To have a purpose, to intend something. To devise for a specific function or end. Okay, we got the idea. Everybody knows what design is, don't we? You sure? All right. Recognizing design. Do you see design? Well, okay, just on the basics, you say, well, that looks like just geologic activities and so on. Produces rock and mountains. Do you recognize design? What's the difference? The matter is the same, right? It's still rock. It's the arrangement of that rock that we go, oh yeah, that's design, obviously. You have to be brain dead to not figure that one out. Well, you know what? Go back to the 1700s to William Paley, creationist back then, because most of them were actually. Okay, he wrote a book called Natural Theology, or Evidences of the Existence and Attributes of the Deity, collected from the appearances of nature. Well, he introduced probably one of the most famous metaphors in the philosophy of science, the image of the watchmaker. He said, living organisms, Paley argued, are even more complicated than watches, in a degree which exceeds all computation. Folks, if he was around today, he would have to find some other superlatives, because it's in a degree which absolutely 100%, bazillion times over, exceeds all computation, right? How else to account for the often amazing adaptations of animals and plants? Amazing, back in the 1700s. Only an intelligent designer could have created them, just as only an intelligent watchmaker can make a watch. If you see it, you say, yes, design, designer, goes hand in hand. All right, your job, design a robot. Less than a quarter-inch tall, carry heavy loads, dig large holes, cross any terrain, find its own energy sources, and make other robots like itself. Even today, if you can do this, you've got yourself, if you patent it, $1 bazillion, right? Now, of course, we've maybe figured this one out. This engineering was already accomplished. The work is done. It's an ant, right? So right away, I'm going, oh, yeah, well, that's pretty amazing, all right. So all of a sudden, now that evolved, it wasn't designed. It came about by random chance process, but it wasn't designed. That's what an evolution would have to say. So here's the thing. Complex things require a designer, intelligence, and a plan. What's evolution have? No designer, no intelligence, no plan. It's at the mercy of chemical reactions and random processes. In the big picture, it is. So if I ask for equations of life, I used to do this in my physics class. You need to make life. What would you have? What do you need? Well, I'll just give it all, because I don't have time to ask you. Well, what do you need? You need matter. Yeah, you got to start with that. You need some form of energy, if you're in evolution, by the way. You need chance process and lots and lots and lots of time. And maybe it'll evolve. That's their idea. So for those who couldn't read, I just put pictures down there. I use dice for chance and sun's energy and so on. On the other hand, so evolution then, what does it say? It's undirected natural processes generated all life. Therefore, lots of time is needed. All right, how about if you're the other side now? Matter plus energy plus directed processes plus time is creation. Well, what's the difference here? Well, let me see. I put a Bible in. I had to figure something there instead of the random dice, right? Because God said that he created. He's a designer. He's an engineer. The best one in the universe, by far, hands down. What would you state? Well, creation theory states that God directed all processes in the formation of life, so little time was needed. You don't need a lot of time. All right, you getting the idea of design now? How about this? I don't think anybody would argue this. This building is a marvel of architectural design. Design means there was a designer. You're a painter. This painting shows a mastery of technique. This engine, unless it's a Ford, is a real piece of sophisticated engineering. I had to say that, sorry. I have a Ford in my motorhome. All right? And you go, we're all good. And we recognize it. We say, yes, yes, yes. But somehow this becomes atheistic logic. Are you ready? Atheistic logic. Clearly, no one made any of this. And he looks at everything we see in nature and its complexity and absolutely the marvel of what is out there, blindly says, oh no, it can come out on its own. And I go, really? I get it, there's worldviews, and that'll come up in a second here. How about this one? Intelligent design. Oh my, no. Humans didn't invent us at all. We evolved from plastic wires and little micro thingers. And I'm going, sheesh. In a way, that's what the story is. If you believe in vertical type evolution, what they call macroevolution. All right, are you ready? Supposing now we talked about this idea of interpreting evidence. The reason I bring this up, are you ready? Here's the grand picture. I could probably quit after I just said this one thing. It's not the evidence or the facts that we see, it's how they're interpreted that makes the big difference here. Right? Unless you're willfully being deceptive, you look at something, I see the room, and we fill up this room, and I say, yeah, we all arrived, and I can sort of observe all that, and we're all in agreement. Now, BC comic strip. Bill, you remember these? He's not nodding yet. You do? Okay, good. I think that's Thor. And he's an observer, and Johnny Hart, by the way, was the one that wrote these. And he sees a turtle going into the pond, the proverbial warm little pond, we'll say. And that little turtle goes in there, and you see blub, 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 and you see the bubbles. He's an observer. He's seeing what's happening. And lo and behold, out comes an alligator, and he triumphantly declares evolution is a fact. Turtle changed into the alligator. Maybe not. Right? Maybe he didn't have all the information. Darned alligator ate the turtle if you didn't get that. All right. Now here's actually Johnny Hart, the guy that wrote these. He had all those comic strips for a long, long period of time. And he said, I believe the Bible is the Word of God, he said, and I see all the foolishness in evolution theory. The main thing, of course, is that evolutionists have never come up with one indisputable piece of evidence. The top one is the missing link. Something is always missing. The absurdity of it all is beyond reason. Wow. Potent words from him. All right. Your turn. Your paleontologist degree is granted. Honorary degrees on every person in this room. And you get out there and you happen to dig up this perfectly formed skull. There's the skull. Now, all we have is the bone, and we're lucky enough it wasn't even crushed much, so we're able to have a good picture of it, not too much guessing going on at all. But you ask the question, we got to know something about it. And the particular one I want to ask is, would you say this is a carnivore, a herbivore, or an omnivore? Carnivore means strict meat eater, of course, herbivore plant, and omnivore, both. And so you've got to do is, if you have not seen this, you notice how I said that. For those that have been in my presentation, shh. We're going to vote. Sorry, quick. I'll do it for the audience. You online, I can't see your hands. I'll watch these guys down here. All right, quick one. Be bold. Just go for it. How many think it's a carnivore? Put up your hand. Okay, pretty good. Yep. How many think a herbivore? Okay, how many think an omnivore? Okay, majority hands, omnivore, very few herbivores and carnivore. Well, if you believed it was carnivore, for example, you would go to the artist for interpretation and say, I think it's a carnivore. Can you make it look like a carnivore more? So you put some flesh on it. Okay, put him in a snarled look, right? He's gritting his teeth out like that, and you got the fur on him and everything. Yeah, it kind of looks like one, doesn't he? Now, the reason I pulled this one off is because we actually have this creature alive today. So we don't have to go back to make an interpretation. We have more evidence. It's a modern day camel. And the camel is a herbivore. All right? Now, that's not the, I do the same thing. Why? Because in your little brain, I should say your little brain, that's not good to say. In your big brain, I'll show you at the end, you're actually pretty good at what brain you have. Okay, how about a modern camel? And I said, okay, because of the incisors, wasn't it? That's kind of what got us. Right? And so that's usually meant to kill things and chew up animals. Well, not necessarily. You can go at fruit and hard-cored fruits and so on. You need big teeth or big claws for that matter. But I actually have a real something here. This is my other show and tell. I'm out of view. How good are your eyesight, folks? And I'll just flip my screen to the next side here. Nope. He's jawless all of a sudden. Okay, what do we got? Looks kind of similar, don't we? We have kind of grinders and molars, and we have the big fangy things, don't we? All right, and I used to go around and ask this. You know what? This is a tough one. It's surprising how few people actually know what that is. By the way, I had to do dental work on him once. I had to glue a tooth back on, so I was classified as a dentist now. Well, you know what it is? Alrighty? This one is a... By the way, how many... You got your brain... Your brain is sitting there, and you thought of a creature, right? Everybody's got one in their brain? How many thought of a black bear? Maybe Cam did. Okay. Well, Bob, you can't count because you knew this already. He's a conservation officer. Doesn't count. A black bear. So what is he? Omnivore, isn't he? In that case. Very interesting. See, what the problem is this. It's not what the stuff is made of. For example, in this picture, it's a very simple one. You've all seen this. We all see the same thing, don't we? Everybody up there? We all see that black and white combination figurine. Some will right away see two faces looking inward. Others will see the goblet. Isn't that interesting? Your brain can actually interpret exactly the same thing two different ways. This one's a little harder. You get a woman's face or a saxophone player. The point is that we all see the same stuff. So that's going to be key. Even for scientists, when we see the same stuff, sometimes you just interpret differently because it'll depend on your worldview and what you think of things. So that's why I'm going to get into this. Not all science is the same. There's two types, folks. Please try this on for size for now. Operational science is usually pretty good stuff. It's where you can go into a lab and test things out. You can make hypotheses and you'll get experiments and so on and find out, does it work or not? Is that the truth? Well, you can do that. It's repeatable and testable. Creationists were good scientists too. Thumbs up. The biggest problem comes now in evolution theory and Big Bang theory and so on, is that historical or origin science, it's not repeatable and you can't test it. So you can't go back and redo a Big Bang, better not, right? You can't go and recreate 500 million years worth of supposed evolution. You can't do that in a lab. So we got a problem. Which one would you tend to trust more? Operational science, right? And that's fair enough. Like for all of us, we try to make interpretations of the past. But if we weren't there, it gets more and more circumspect. In other words, you got to be careful, of what you might be interpreting. I like Barbara Kay here this came from National Post. She says, 160 years into Darwinism, there's one mystery we still can't explain. So here it is, the quote. Back when the world was young, I was taught that 4 visionaries shaped modernity, that's hard to say. Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, and Albert Einstein. Of them, only Einstein's could be subjective to scientific scrutiny. What does that mean about Charles Darwin theories? The rest remained hypotheses, resistant to such standard scientific tests as falsifiability, replicability, and predictability, but so beautiful in their comprehensiveness that the intelligentsia accepted them for what they were not, settled science. Wow. That's a pretty interesting comment to make. So that means that, go in the past, watch out. Nobody observed it. Be careful of interpretation. This is what's going to happen in science all over the place. You can have things that were done in the past, for example, fossils. You can have things like layering of sedimentary rocks or the erosion of those, like the picture of Grand Canyon. That's data. Everybody can see that. So watch out when somebody says, yeah, but the data shows, or the facts show, be circumspect right away when you say that, because it'll turn out what you interpret it like, depends. Generally, if you've been brought up with an evolutionary view, there is no God, everything comes about, and you're used to sort of everything happening slow and gradual over eons of times, you may look at that data and say, yeah, I see evolution. Okay? I get that. On the other hand, if your assumption of creation, and you say, well, God created, and you sort of have that in your grid, well, maybe you see creation. So what will happen is your interpretation is influenced by what? Your assumptions and biases, or presuppositions is another term for it. You are. We all are. You know what, though? The more you're aware of that, sometimes the better you can at interpreting. Because you're aware that I may be biased. As a creationist, I may be biased, yes. Now, how about this one? Here's that same one back in National Geographic, The Other Humans I talked about. I like this quote in this one. It's perfect. That's not my phone. I remember it turned off. Okay, the disagreement between Trinkaus and Harvadi is hardly the first time that two respected paleoanthropologists have looked at the same set of bones and come up with mutually contradictory interpretations. Perfect. Same set of bones. They're both experts. They look at them, total opposite interpretations. We have to be careful. We have to be maybe a bit, show some humility when, even as scientists, we look at things. For example, there's a fancy one they use in textbooks. Sorry for this one. Homology, by the way, just means study of physical similarities between various creatures. And one you often see is this one, where all the bones that make up everything from a salamander to a man to a bird, a bat, a horse, and a whale, and so on, they have similarities, but they're different. They're varied, right? So that's called, by the way, I think it shows there. The bottom part just simply says, all modern four-legged things, tetrapods, have basically pentadactyl or 5 limb structure. So they're constructed from the same bones, but they perform different function. Okay, that we can see. We can observe that, not a problem. Put it on my grid. Okay, what about this homology of limb structures? If you're an assumption of evolution, you'll again say, oh yeah, that's a good example of common ancestry. It changed from the same creature gradually over eons of time, and gradually that muscles, for example, in a reptile, that leg eventually turned into what need to be a wing. Common ancestry. If, on the other hand, you go with creation, we say, oh no, I think it's better interpreted that we actually see the action of a common designer, because there's similarity there. Okay, a little more work for you. One more time. We're getting there. Evolution or common design. Look at this next picture, and right away, what comes to your brain? You ready? Ryobi tools. Well, of course, common design, right? Well, now let's take a look at this for a sec. You have similar switches, power supplies, casings, gears, mechanisms, but with variation. Well, if I wanted to be cute with this, which I am going to be, I said, you know what? I think I can classify that in an evolutionary tree of life. So I started off with the ancestral power supply. And then I went up to the primitive suckers and blowers and heaters. Then they started getting more complex mechanisms as time went on. Some were able to drill, some were able to cut, and so on. So when I look at that and I go, wait a minute, maybe you can, what you see, you can interpret it. It's amazing how you can make a story fit. You can do it, even in science. All right? This is what I think it comes down to. If you have the creation in mind and you look at fossils of, let's say, a dinosaur, that's your input. You may come from two different standpoints. I get that. It's what you're trained in. It's what we're all trained in, what we're brought up with. So we have these different operating systems, so what we see and we look at is we see different results, depending on our training. Now what we're going to do is quickly go on to some of the things that are amazing. All right? Here we go. Now I picked this one, I just had to throw it in here. I usually set it up with other things. Inside the human cell, now remember there's a trillion-ish of those little guys in your body. So they're pretty small. Now, I looked at this and I thought, here's an interesting protein. Remember we talked about those proteins being made? Do you know that their cells have protein tubes that act as highways, and they move containers along called vesicles? Sounds like some kind of highway and trucks and so on here. Sounds like almost like a plan. So you'll actually see this protein, and this has been generated, I think, for harvard.edu. Motor proteins actually walk down the protein highway with a vesicle containing chemical compounds. This is in your cell, okay? Now, this is important that you get this because when you look at this and you go, that's that. This isn't a random little chemical mess inside a cell. This is highly organized, highly structured moving of materials in one part of the cell to the other. Those are just atoms and molecules right there, made up of mostly amino acids and proteins. And I go, wow, I had a ton of those I could show in the cell. Then I went quickly like this. Well, what about all that chemical reactions, what they call the metabolic pathways that you get in the cell of a body? Well, it's a linked series of chemical reactions. So how many remember this from the textbooks? Anybody? Come on, please, show me. You must remember this from biology or something. It's called the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. And what it does is it's the energy cycle. It's how it takes basically sugars and burns them and produces energy. You need to go from, right at the very bottom, can you see that ADP to ATP at the very bottom? You can't, okay? Point is you need that. It's energy. Got to produce that guy, adenosine triphosphate. Well, it turns out that is just, you can't just throw those chemicals into a cell and expect it to happen. It needs a machine. Oh, here we go again. Sounds like it's designed or something. That machine is classed as the world's tiniest motor at this time, and they use the word, by the way, even secularists, motor. They even use words like rotor, stator, so on. So I'll give a quick little clip from a creation website that's made a graphic of this. And this is going on. These things are so small, they're in nanometers in size. Don't get me wrong how small these are, but they're working like a motor. I was quite amazed. Okay, here we go.
This animated sequence shows the ATP synthase enzyme in operation. The animation is based on an incredible series of scientific discoveries. Only the colors show artistic license. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the energy currency of the cell. ATP is produced by a tiny molecular rotary motor, rotating at up to 7,000 RPM. These are so small that 100,000 would fit side by side in a millimeter. A current of protons drives the motor, unlike man-made electric motors which use electrons. This portion of the enzyme is where adenosine diphosphate is combined with a phosphate ion in the presence of a catalyst to produce ATP, which is then released, making way for the next cycle. A top view of the enzyme shows the sequential operation. Almost every biochemical process in your body requires ATP. Such a nanomachine exhibits all the characteristics of super-intelligent design. ATP is vital for life, and many of these motors were needed before the first living cell could exist. An evolutionary impossibility.
I agree. An evolutionary impossibility, absolutely. That has to be in that first cell, by the way. The first primitive cell they talk about, that has to be there. You can't get energy production without it. And it's going on, what does it say, the 100,000 RPM? So that makes 300,000 of those little ATPs produced every second or something like that, or every minute, sorry. All right, quickly, this bacteria, here's an example of metabolic pathways, and you'll see in the very center that little Krebs cycle, because there's all kinds of chemical processes that are going on inside of it, right? And you go, wow, that's pretty complex. That is controlled. It just can't go willy-nilly. You can't just mix all the chemicals together and expect it to happen. You have all kinds of problems. You know, then I found one for the human. Are you ready for the metabolic pathways of a human being? Can you even see that? Well, let me zoom in. There's part of this citric acid cycle right there, just part of it. All these have to be controlled in the factory of a human cell. Have to be. God, absolutely. I'm going to quickly show this one because they're just kind of cute videos more. Immediate design perfection or death. I like this because remember, to evolve, you got to make sure that you pass on your genes to the offspring type of thing, and you want to be able to survive against predators and that. I love this one. It comes from TED Talks, and it talks about the camouflage of this particular fish called a cuttlefish. So I'll quickly show it.
Cuttlefish, I love cuttlefish. This is a giant Australian cuttlefish, and there he is, his droopy little eyes up here. But they could do pretty amazing things too. Here we're going to see one backing into crevice, and watch his tentacles. He just pulls them in, makes them look just like algae. Disappears right into the background. So we're learning lots new from the shallow water, still exploring that deep, learning lots from the shallow water. There's a good reason why. I mean, the shallow water is full of predators. Here's a barracuda. And if you're an octopus or a cephalopod, you need to really understand how to use your surroundings to hide. In the next scene, you're going to see a nice coral bottom. And you'd see that an octopus would stand out very easily there if you couldn't use your camouflage, use your skin to change color and texture. Here's some algae in the foreground and an octopus. Isn't that amazing? Now Roger spooked him, so he took off, a cloud of ink, lands, and when he lands, the octopus says, "Okay, I've been seen, best thing to do is get as big as I can get." That big brown makes his eye spot very big. So he's bluffing. Let's do it backwards. I thought he was joking when he first showed it to me. I thought it was all graphics. So here it is in reverse. Watch the skin color, watch the skin texture. Just an amazing animal. Can change color and texture to match the surroundings. Watch him blend right into this algae. 1, 2, 3. And now he's gone and so am I. Thank you very much.
So if you were in the military, would you like that? Yeah, I looked it up too again because I was more interested. Well, there's all kinds of now videos you can get on YouTube for the cuttlefish. Just look at them and see what they adapt and change into like that. Now the thing is, try to evolve that. Just think about it for a moment. I mean, he can learn to back into an algae, but if he doesn't change the correct colors, it's not going to do much. Get what I'm saying? Or what's the point of developing the ability to camouflage if you're not willing to use it? There's all kinds of things that go on that how do you evolve it? And you know what? I'm going to push on 1 second, guys. I know you're good. I got to give the final finale here. The curtains are opening. I'm in your little brain, and I have to correct that. The brain is by far probably the most awesome piece of design that is in nature, hands down. You know the brain is made of nerve cells. There's many, many of them, and they're interconnected through these neurons and so on that connect them, kind of like a mini computer. They're not really, but kind of like that. And so there's pictures of these things where they show these neural synapses, you know, the bzzz all going on. Even in Bill's brain right now, it's just going like crazy inside there. Well, it turns out that the human brain consists of about 10,000 million nerve cells. Each nerve cell puts out between 10,000 and 100,000 connecting fibers. So the total number of connections in the human brain is about 1,000 million millions. I won't read the next part. Anyhow, there's the number of them. That's a big number. 1,000 million millions. Just go by this one for a sec. Let's compare this then to a computer. Let's take it to the new Apple M1 CPU. You ready? Well, the human brain has about 10 to the 15th, that means 15 zeros, synapses, connecting points. Apple M1 CPU has about 10 to the 11th. So there's about 10,000 more connections in there than in the most recent high-end computer or chip that's used in the Apple, using the Apple M1 CPU. Energy use, about 20 watts for a brain, 40 watts for the Apple. Processing speed, the brain goes at a sluggingly slow 100 cycles a second, 100 operations per second, as opposed to 3 gigahertz, 3 billion cycles a second that the Apple M1 chip does. The reason that we outperform it so many times over in the big picture is because we do what's called parallel distribution, they do serial, and I go like this, fault tolerant. Yes, human brains can amazingly take impacts and damages and still recover to degree. The M1 CPU, probably not very good if you hit that thing, break it, and whatever. Is it learn? Yes, and I still say no. The chip itself doesn't learn, but software can be put in there for these AI machines. Intelligence or consciousness, usually, that's a joke by the way, or no for the other one, I'm still picking no. Now, let's compare this on a grid. This came from All Things Great and Small. And I want to compare. So big picture is, the bottom tells you how much memory you have in the brain, kind of like a computer. So it's in megabytes, right? Millions of bytes. A lot of us know that term now, I like that. The other way is how fast things work. And it's in millions of instructions per second. Each of the grid lines go up by a factor of 1,000. Okay, by a factor of 1,000 every time. First 1,000, million, billion, what am I up to? Trillion, and so on. All right. If you do manual calculations, it's not very fast and it's not very much information present. A bacteriophage is much better than that. That's the simple, although it needs another bacteria to survive. A book is about 1 megabyte. CDs and DVDs in the order of megabytes. And then we get the terabyte hard drives. Then we get the Library of Congress. And we'll kind of quit there because that's most of the known information that we have within that Library of Congress. So there you go, just a comparison grid. Go the other way. Well, old radios, they were pretty fast in the way they transferred information. Then we have televisions. Then we went to fiber optics. And that's about the end of what I'll show there, how fast we can process things. So then you go up the other way. There's the lowly bacteria. There's the first home computer. Sorry, little bacteria. Single cell outdid the first home computer in 1985. The earthworm was about this, that picture in there. The VCR, to bring back memories, a spider. Home computer in 2000. A supercomputer, the Cray 1 in 1976. A lizard. A mouse. See where we're headed. The Deep Blue chess machine, the first one to win in chess against some of the grandmasters in 1997. A chimpanzee and a supercomputer. Now, here we go. We've got a problem here. Anyhow, I'm going to put the supercomputer, you notice I moved it up and down. We'll put human here, the brain, and we're going, you hear it? This is absolutely kind of, they know this is correct. See, the best, fastest supercomputer right now, I'm just about done. It does 415 quadrillion computations in a second. It's called a 415 petaflop. You may not even know what that word is. It's well above giga and tera, right? Because there's peta after those, and then there's exa, 0.4 exa. Okay, you know what? You know where the human brain is? 1 exa, 1,000 petaflops. How big is that computer? It fills that whole room. They need special supercoolers on the thing. Tons and tons of power going on. But in overall function, your brain, I can still say this, basically almost, well, about equal now. This machine that takes a whole room, is that designed and engineered? Yes. Is the brain designed and engineered? Whoops, if you're in evolution, you say no. But if you're, right, look at this and you have to say, well, maybe. See, I like Isaac Asimov. He was an evolutionist, right? The human brain is the most orderly, complex, and orderly arrangement of matter in the universe. Done. Could you get this by random mutation and natural selection? Think about it. Scientists, now are they unbiased and objective? Here's part of the problem in interpretation. Here's Scott Todd, an immunologist. Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. In other words, it's not just matter. Therefore, it's excluded automatically. Even Darwin made an interesting statement here. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. How do you get the human brain? And you know what? It's not just the matter, right? It's the arrangement of the matter in the brain. So when you looked at this evolution creation topic we've had, remember I said evidence against one position is support for the other? I mean, it's so slam dunk to me, it's just the way I am now. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and basically everything there. We have in Psalm 146, He is the maker of heaven and earth, the sea and everything in them. He remains faithful forever. In Acts chapter 14, Paul says, we are bringing you good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them. Consistent story in the Bible, isn't it? And here's what Peter told us to do. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. You don't have to be a scientist, right, to do this, because there's always some scientists in some area that'll be smarter than us. That's the way it goes. The point is that overall, though, you have a picture, you have a place to go. There are resources out there, like CMI that Bob mentioned. So I'd like to thank everybody. Get the worship team, they might be thinking of coming up now. Or Bob, are you handing it over now? Thank you for your patience. I did go on long, but Dawn went longer than this 2-3 weeks ago, I think it was. So I'm going to sort of go, okay. Sorry for the length of time, but I did finish, so thank you very much. Hand over to Bob. Okay, thanks. Okay, okay.
Well, that's more information than I think we need.
Yeah.
But you know, it is it is the same problem that we've had for eons. It's evolution versus creation. And you can the data that Greg gave us, how can evolution prove anything? And if you want to get away from the Christian aspect of it, back in 1850, there was a German scientist, Theodor Celsius, developed a theory called the second law of thermodynamics. Very simple. It means everything goes down, breaks down, or entropy. Entropy is just that, it breaks down. And they've shown that over the generations, each generation loses a certain amount of mutations or our genome. And so evolution says it gets better. Even this law of thermodynamics, which everybody accepts as a law, says it gets worse. And Greg has proved it with all of the detail that he's given us. And I want to thank you, Greg. You and I are on the same page all the time, and I appreciate that. Could we have the worship team come up, and we'll close with a closing song. And we have coffee and goodies downstairs after service, so please stay and enjoy some fellowship.